Joe's Art Stuff in beautiful Boone, North Carolina. I have a special guest today, another episode in our continuing Insight into Art series. And he is well-trained, highly decorated, and much sought-after international artist, and his name is Eric Wiegardt. Eric?
Oh, thank you.
Welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
I looked at your work, and I see a lot of things in your work that I don't see in anybody else. Sometimes, as a watercolorist, the color just flows across the page. There are some times when you have some very distinct marks, distinct strokes on in your work. So I want to get to that, but before I do, I noticed that you're from Washington State.
Yes.
The great-grandson of an Oyster Pioneer.
Yes, yes.
Tell us about an Oyster Pioneer.
Well, my great-grandfather came from Denmark, and he settled in our area and started getting involved in the oyster business. Actually, he was involved in that before down in San Francisco, but came up to our area, and this eventually worked into one of the largest producers of oysters in the United States. And the estuary, Joe, is still considered, I guess, the largest unpolluted estuary in the United States. We have no problem eating oysters raw right out of the bay there. My grandfather and his two brothers developed the Wiegardt Brothers business as it is today, and it's still going strong. Our side of the family is not in it anymore, but I have cousins that are still working it. I did grow up working in the oyster business, picking oysters, shoveling oysters, canning oysters, all of those things, and I'll have to tell you that painting is a lot more fun.
I meant to ask you, how does the great-grandson of an oyster pioneer wind up going to school and becoming a professional in civil engineering and eventually becoming a painter?
I enjoyed math and physics in high school, and thought I would pursue that in college. About the junior year of college in the engineering program, I was starting to get a little bit tired of the math, and I think that engineering was a little bit too exacting for my taste. But I finished out the degree, and then I ended up working in marketing at a large industrial company in the Midwest. 2 years of being in the corporate world, answering phones, pushing papers around, I thought I've got to do something different, and it just wasn't for me. And I'm so thankful for my wonderful wife when I told her I've got to get out of here, and I thought I might pursue my childhood art, that she said, okay, let's take a look at it. And we heard about a wonderful school in Chicago. Went up and took a look at it. It's the American Academy of Art in Chicago. And when I walked through those doors, I saw work that I had never seen before in my previous schooling experience. It was very disciplined. It made a lot of sense to me. These kids could really paint and draw, and I said, I want to be able to do that. And as I mentioned, my wife was very supportive. And so through a series of events, we ended up in Chicago going to art school.
So you said childhood art. Is that something that you did while working in the family business?
Well, being in a remote area, Joe, there weren't the opportunities to pursue art, at least to not a very extensive scale. I mean, of course, my parents would take me to a painting class when I was in junior high on weekends, once a week, and I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed any art projects in high school if they came along my way. Probably my shop class was really the strongest influence in me in just working with my hands, and the 3 to several hours, and I could stretch it out and get in there and work in maybe 3 to 6 hours, and the teacher would just let me go with some of my projects, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. And while I was in the corporate world, I thought, if I'm going to be working the rest of my life, I would just like to be working at something that I really enjoyed, and the time would fly by. And that kind of drew me back to that experience in high school. But I did not have the disciplined study that one needs to pursue a degree in this, or one that one really should have to pursue, I think, a living in this. That didn't come until I found the academy in Chicago.
I noticed in looking at your website, ericwiegardt.com, that's where I got part of your biography, but also where I saw about your essential design art kit. And I look at the word design, and so many watercolor artists that come through the hallowed halls of
Yeah.
Cheap Joe's, design and structure wouldn't be part of how they work, part of how they even think. And when I saw that, I really wanted to find out more about it.
Yeah, design is a term that's very broad and can encompass so much. And I've seen books written about it, and it goes into quite a bit of it can go into quite a bit of an extensive theory. But really, it just boils down to we have a two-dimensional surface, and we need to organize those shapes and the values, which are the light-dark relationships, to where they're a pleasing arrangement, regardless of the subject, portrait, or still life, or landscape, or marinescape. It's all the same. We need to organize those shapes and those values to where they're pleasing aesthetically to the eye. The Navy painters, shortly after the Impressionists, brought that idea, and Cezanne, that we are not just to dictate a representation of reality on our paper. That's one level of thinking for painting, but it's really not the level that we want to stop at. We want to take the things that we see or our feelings, and we want to make them into a pleasing pattern and arrangement of shapes and values. And that's what design boils down to. Of course, then we then put some color into it, and the color gets all the glory, but really design or value patterns and these shape relationships really do all the work.
Is that how you thought about it when you were a child?
Oh no, as a child, I think that you think, if I can just get this thing on paper to look like the thing I'm looking at, whether it's a chair or a rabbit or whatever, that you think you've made it at that point. But after a while, after you get your drawing skills down, there's so much more to it than that, and that's this design element.
I think at my age, 5 years ago, I wouldn't have picked up any art instruction material. Yet, throughout my childhood, there's always art. And I think there are many people who would love to get back into it if they had the confidence, if they felt like they were going to make progress. And what I see when I look at your Essential Design Art Kit is that there is a certain amount of structure, yet a certain amount of free flow. Mm-hmm. And it's in more than just the art kit itself. It's in some of your DVDs.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's in some of your work, because, as I said, some of your work has distinctive strokes, yet some of it just kind of flows too. Mm-hmm. How did you get do you think your style is set, or has your style, even from 5 years ago, changed up until today?
Well, I've always, even in art school, you can, as many of the students there, you can start to see that we gravitate towards certain interests. And I had that interest back in art school I was fascinated with combining the abstract with the real. In other words, how you can delineate something on your painting, a boat or whatever, but then over in the corner, you make the viewer see another boat, but really you're not painting another boat. You're just putting in a few patterns that make them think that they're seeing that. That's a difficult way to paint. I find it very challenging. It'd be much easier, I think, at times just to go ahead and delineate that boat and that piling and all that kind of thing on the far right. But by just suggesting it, I've allowed the viewer to make that final completion in their mind. And if I can make that without them realizing that they're doing that, then it becomes much more real in their thinking, and they're thinking that they're seeing it. And they're putting that final piece together. They're engaging in the painting. And so that is a much more exhilarating experience. I feel for the viewer, they can become a participant rather than just explaining everything at once and delineating it all out. So I find that my collectors of my paintings will come back to me after a couple months or a year, and they'll say, hey, there's that portion I never really quite saw or really never paid much attention to, and now I see something new there. So I think getting back to your point there is that I will look at that design, get those big relationships together, those patterns, and use a lot of soft edges. And then as the painting starts to dry, I'll start to come in and sculpt in my harder edges and start to delineate. So I've got the soft edges. What you're commenting on is I have the soft edges playing up against the hard edges. And it's that push-pull of those two playing against each other that creates a really nice painterly look. And that painterly look, I think, and I learned a lot from the oil painters on this, that painterly look is really you're combining the abstract with the real, and that's a super exciting area to work within.
I think to me, that's what is most noticeable about your work, is that you do have the soft edges, and then you do have the hard edges. So many, and there's nothing wrong with it, but there's so many watercolorists that they flow all the time, and then you've mixed a couple different aspects into the watercolor medium, which is pretty rare. It's pretty rare.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
And that's much appreciated from that standpoint. So if 10 years ago, if you think about 10 years ago, this is 2012, so 2002, if you think about where you were and what you were doing, and you take that same scene and you paint it then and you paint it today, what's the difference?
You know, a couple of times, Joe, I have taken an older scene and redone it just to see what change I have gone through. Because, quite frankly, I don't notice the changes myself. I have people coming into my gallery and say, "Oh, you're changing now," and they say that frequently. And so, change is always good. Always it's good to be on the edge. So, what would the difference be? I would probably say that maybe my colors might be a little bit bolder, but I think that I keep pushing that envelope, how I can say more with less. Now, you don't do that because you can get through a painting faster and you can do more paintings. It's the power of suggestion that I keep trying to capture. And how can I say that? If I can say that with less and still get the idea across, it is so much more powerful than if I take my time and delineate it out. So I think that you would probably see even bolder brushwork, a more aggressive handling of the medium, something that I could not have done 10 years ago because I didn't have the courage or the skills yet to do. But 10 years ago, I think I was thinking, boy, my paintings are getting real loose. Probably in 10 years from now, I'll probably be tightening up and rendering and settling down to a long process of a tighter painting. Well, it's just the opposite has happened. I just keep pushing this other direction. So, who knows what can be in 10 years.
10 years from now, that's right, that's right. How much does your work in marketing influence how you handle your work now? I noticed that you've got some Eric Wiegardt signature equipment, signature supplies. You brand yourself, you have your own DVDs. One of those was, that caught my eye was Area of Dominance.
Yes.
Then you talk about being more powerful, and as you were saying that, I wondered if Area of Dominance and being more powerful were somehow related.
And what do you mean by being more powerful? What was in the context that you're thinking of?
You said that today, 10 years after the original one, that you had more powerful results or more powerful strokes or more powerful perception in the viewer's eye.
I got you now. Okay.
So I didn't know if Area of Dominance was related in that way or not.
Yeah, in a sense it would be. I would think that my area of dominance, or some might be, say, center of interest. I would say that it might have a little more impact today in my paintings because some of the strokes on the outer edge of my painting might be a little bit looser, which allows the area of dominance to become a little bit more powerful and a little bit stronger. Yes, I think that I think we're always looking for that. How can we make that statement a little bit clearer, and a little bit how can it jump off the wall? The loose techniques coupled with some really hard edges. I've really pushed that in the last couple of years.
Okay. Well, I mentioned just a second ago about your marketing experience and also your civil engineering training. I see a combination of that in how your business is structured, how your training materials, the essentials of design or design essentials, your essential design workbook
Okay.
I think it is. And you take that cube and then you break it down and you take step by step and you build here on what you set up here. In my mind, anybody wanting to take their art to another level or even just get back into it again, like I think there's many people around the country that would do it, that want to do it, I think that would be invaluable to them. How did you come about structuring your training the way it is?
Well, I think, Joe, a lot of that has come out of my workshop teaching, in that students would ask me these questions, and how do you do that? And I would have to say the first number of years of teaching, and I've been doing this quite a while now, I would probably not really give them too direct of an answer, because it just, a lot of that started to come kind of natural. And I had to take a step back and say, really, what is it I am doing here? Why does this work? And then I would start to piece it together and say, well, the reason this works is because this is what I'm doing. And the construction of the cube that you mentioned, but it also applies to the construction of a boat or even a portrait. There are certain steps of thought process that I go through that we can construct. I think constructing is a very good term here, because we are not just painting something that comes. No, there is a construction. There's a discipline to this. There's a discipline to this. This is not unlike math. It's like physics. But it's a visual world, and we have a complex array of visual material out there that, as an artist, we need to break down into readable visual information. In math, you have very complex formulas that you break down into readable formulas or readable symbols. And we do that also with art. It's a discipline. Once you start to look at it as a discipline, then there are certain steps and procedures of construction that, some basic principles that need to be understood. Now, we can deviate from them, we can go and come at them from a different angle and back through the back door, but we need to understand that basic construction of a painting. Painting is especially with watercolor, is not unlike a chess game. You have a goal that you're heading towards. I do a value study. This is where I want to head. But with watercolor, there's a lot of little things that happen that, much as in your opponent in a chess game, they throw a pawn in a direction or a bishop in a direction that you don't expect, and you have to adjust your game plan to get to that end goal. And watercolor is like this. But it's not just happenstance. There is a game plan with this.
Has that influenced the design of your signature brushes?
Yes.
Does it make it easier to do what you're suggesting, that
Yes.
people approach it?
Yes. I like to have, there's a couple qualifications of a brush. One is, I do not like to have many brushes. I do not like to have a whole array of decisions. I want to have a few tools.
I noticed that, yeah.
A few tools that will do a lot. So I have some top quality brushes that will do some big strokes, but then you can also come back in and do some fine work with them, and without having to change into another brush. They have to be economical, because there are some brushes out there that are more expensive, but I don't think that they do that much more than my brushes. But the most important thing about a good brush for me is that it has to hold a lot of water and a lot of pigment. I do not like the action of going back into my palette, trying to get enough on my brush to do what's happening up here in my paper. I want to focus on my paper and what's happening up here, and I want to be able to grab it and load it up and do it without having it run out and having to go get some more. And I want it another quality is I want it to be strong and tough enough that I can take that brush, get all the water and all the pigment out of it, and what we call a dry brush, and jam it into the paint, and then just jam it into my paper, and what I call mush it around. All the bristles are splayed to get a nice textured look, but not harm the brush. And then I can shake it out, get some more, and come back with a very fine point. So,
what you've just described to me is, I'm not quite sure how to put it, but I just know it just goes with the result of what I see in your work. It's a style, a process that I know is unique to you, but yet it's efficient, it sounds like.
yeah.
And that's, if you want to learn something, new, you want to expand your boundaries, I simply see it as one of the most effective ways to improve on your art. One more thing.
Sure.
Also on ericwiegardt.com, you can find some of your work. There was a work called Halibut Cove, and it was number 3477 or something
Yes.
like that.
Yes.
Have you done that many pieces?
Oh, more than that. More paintings than that. I think I'm closing in on about 4,000 paintings. Yes, I don't count the paintings. The paintings that I do at a workshop that sell, I do not put a number on those. And so that would probably bring me close to 4,000. Also, the numbering system, I started at 100 30 years ago when I first opened my gallery, because who wants to buy painting number 4? So that was number 104 at that time. So you can take 100 off that. But it's pretty close to 4,000 water paintings that I've done, yes.
That's some body of work.
Yeah.
And you take it internationally. I saw a sheet where just last year you were in France
Yes.
for one of your workshops.
Yes.
And next year you're going to be in Italy.
Yes.
Tell us about what it's like to teach in overseas.
Just one clarification. I'm not teaching French indigenous people or the Italians. It's a workshop. They're all Americans going
I
over
wanted
there.
to find out if they're following you
Yes.
over to those locations.
Yes, it would be like the students here at Cheap Joe's that would say, they want to come on that workshop. But those are a lot of fun. They're all plein air painting, and of course, if it rains one day, then we might come inside. But we paint on location. We have great food, and a lot of shopping goes along too. So this is just, these are fun with a capital F. Okay. Now the workshops that I'm doing, like here and around the country, they're fun, but it's fairly intense 5 days because I've got a lot of material I want to cover with the students, and we're working hard. That is a little bit work and play, but this will be my 8th or 9th time over, I think, and every one of them has been just a real pleasure. And it's really a lot of fun to paint on location, because you get to see the colors that you won't see in a photograph. So, and you become more intimate with your subject that way too.
Oh, good. EricWiegardt.com is where you can find more information on that workshop. And if you want to take your art to the next level, and you want to have a semi-structured yet confident approach to take it to the next level, check out EricWiegardt.com.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure.